Art drives architecture. I made the building about time, architecture, and cinema. I mean, I didn't come from Harvard or Yale or any of that. I'm from Bremerton, Washington. I'm religiously working, kind of every day on these watercolor pads, no matter what, and let's say half the time it's a building, and other times it's drawings. That's this. And so the process of thinking is galvanized by the process of drawing. Architecture is an autonomous discipline. Come on. It's connected to everything in life. Connected to the sun, the beauty of the sun, connected to the amazing creations of nature. It's connected to how we move and interact as people. It's not an autonomous discipline. Architecture is also a spiritual thing. And if you have an idea, a meaningful idea that drives a design, people can feel it when they go in the building. It gets so complicated, you don't understand what the point is. The ideas that drive the design, for me, are the most important thing. And that's what shows up in this. Kristin Feireiss understood that. That's why this exhibition is so important. It takes place in Berlin, but it shows the foundation of where I was coming from. There's hope. There's hope. Just saw part of the interview you did with my good friend Zupei.
Oh, yes. This was very recent. In fact, I was in Beijing. We saw each other. I gave a lecture there at his university. There were 200 people who came to my talk. It was very good, very good.
He organized a symposium on my work in 2019. It was really great, and I had exhibition there. No, it was his. But I really like his architecture. He's quite a good architect.
And he's progressing quite a bit. He doesn't just build his work on how he started. There is a real progression and reinvention, and every work is quite different. You can recognize him, but still, and he is lucky to get incredible commissions in small.
Very nice work, right?
Yeah.
And he stays away from too much commercial. He doesn't. No, he's very special. He's unique.
Absolutely
important.
So it is very nice to see you. First of all, I have to congratulate you on this exhibition that you now have. It's called Steven Holl, Drawing as Thought, at the Choban Foundation's Museum for Architectural Drawing in Berlin. So this is where your watercolors are now on view, and these drawings were selected by curator Kristin Feireiss, who is the founder of Aedes Gallery, which is right next door to Choban Foundation. And she selected these watercolors out of 50,000.
She came here. I'm in my archive in New York, Rhinebeck. You can see the shelves in the back. She came here with Jürgen, and they spent the entire day, and we talked about how to do this exhibition. But she really knows my work, from the beginning, because she was there when I won the AGB Berlin-Gedenkbibliothek competition in 1989.
I have the catalog of the exhibition right in front of me. So we're going to go over some of your projects, some of the highlights which are here. And so welcome, and let's start right there. Let's start with your watercolors. I think you began drawing in 1970, which was some years before you started your practice. So you describe this drawing process as a meditation on watercolors. If you could talk about this fascination and dedication.
First of all, the exhibition is organized in two levels. The first level is all black and white pencil drawings, or black and white watercolor. It's all black and white. And she organized it very, very intelligently, because it basically sets up a foundation of where I came from. So the first, she chose the Porta Vittoria project from Milan, 1986. And that was an exploration of not doing morphology and typology, but doing spatial phenomena as a way to make a city. That was what I somehow got on the map in Italy. And after that, I was invited to the Palazzo del Cinema competition in 1990. Major moment in my life. Those drawings were there. And this is the grounding. And these 4 projects are the beginning of my work. And in that project, we worked on it for like 8 months. And we studied the way that cinema could be a kind of idea that drives the design and architecture. It was Aldo Rossi, James Sterling, Raphael Moneo, John Nouvel, Sverre Fehn. They did a special issue in 1991 of all the entries, like 3 pages each in Domus. You know, back in the day when Domus used to really show what a competition was about. And it was very important for me because, I ran into Javel 6 months later, and he said, Steven, your project was the best. I made the building about time, architecture, and cinema. And that project put me on the map. That's why this exhibition is so important. It takes place in Berlin, but it shows the foundation of where I was coming from.
So maybe if you could talk about this memorial library competition. There is a photograph of you and Tom Main and Michael Rotondi on the steps of Altes Museum in Berlin. And so a little bit, if you could talk about how important that project was for you, and why did you decide to represent it in black and white? There is no color.
No, I was always drawing. In those days, I was always drawing in black and white. When I first came to Manhattan in 1977, I went to the Institute for Architecture and Urban Studies, and I met Andrew MacNair, and I showed him my portfolio of these black and white pencil drawings. And he said, brilliant work. You should always draw in black and white. All the postmodernists now are trying to make everything in bright colors. Forget it. Like Michael Graves and Venturi. So for a number of years until around 1981 or 82, everything was just big black and white, incredible drawings. And that was also the Berlin Library drawings. But the key, and there's Tom Main and Michael Rotondi on the steps. This is a very important competition because we were the so-called avant-garde of the next wave young American architects. The original Gedenkbibliothek was built right after the Berlin airlift. And it was built with American money. German architects had a competition. Now, this project was a kind of back with German money. They wanted American architects to do the addition, and they want the youngest, most avant-garde, interesting American architects. So it's an interchange. It's not just a library. It's a global interchange, a cultural national interchange between cultures. So in many ways, it was one of the most important competitions in that period, 1988. And I worked on it for a long while. The problem was you have this existing building, and I had this idea because it was the first library that had continuous browsing, open stacks. So I wanted to make a browsing circuit to make the new really make a browsing circuit. And I had this, we were listening to Wings of Desire. We're watching that film by Wim Wenders many times. And it puts the children at the top. When a child was a child, it has this whole Rilke poetry about the children. So I put the children's library on top, and I made a loop around the whole building, jumped over the original slab, and came back down. And once I had that idea, I said, we're going to win this. And Tom Main came to my office in New York
because we both did silk screens. We were doing these elaborate presentations for a competition, so much energy. John Nichols did our silk screens and did Tom Main's silk screens. So he came to visit to check the silk screens before they were sent in. And he saw my proposal and he said, "You're going to win."
It's interesting how ideas kind of migrate from project to project. You were just talking about this bridge and loop, and there is a similar idea from coming from Porta Vittoria, and then eventually you made it in Beijing. So it's quite interesting how these ideas just emerge and re-emerge and appearing and disappearing. It's quite.
Let me just finish this. The reason this exhibition is so important, it has my 4 seminal projects, and the one that changed my life is Kiasma, the competition in Helsinki. 1993, I made the drawings, right? The chiasmatic intersection, right? It was a key drawing. It was a concept from Merleau-Ponty that's driving the design. So everything was done in sketches. Those are part of the exhibition. Then large black and white drawings. And they're also in that exhibition. But that also, the design drawings were produced on the computer. So 1994, we had one computer. And I changed the design. Almost like 48 hours. I went back to the original sketch. 48 hours. So we had to have someone working 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours in order to produce the finished drawings. The building is kind of complicated, this intertwining, Anyway, it's that building. I won that competition, and it opened in 1998. But after that, I had an office. Up until that time, I was just a professor with 1 person, 2 people. Then I had 6 people, because we had to produce, and we did it together with Juhani Palasma in Helsinki. But that building really, what's really exciting now in my life, the exhibition has this real importance because the ground level is this foundational. Where did this guy come from? I didn't come from Harvard or Yale or any of that. I'm from Bremerton, Washington, a 2-bit town with 30,000 people. My mother worked in the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in tool control. My dad had a sheet metal shop, and I worked there as a sheet metal apprentice when I was 15. So, it was that's a long journey from Bremerton, Washington, to Beijing and, the other things that we've been able to do. So what I really love about this now upstairs is all watercolors, right? And those are current projects like the Reach at the Kennedy Center, the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, the current University of Pennsylvania Performing Arts Center, which is under construction. I'm very proud to be able to do a building that's in line with Frank Furness's library and Lou Kahn's Richards Medical Laboratory on that same axis, right at the front at 33rd and Chestnut is our building. It's under construction. That's also in upstairs. So downstairs is this foundational thing, all in black and white, heavy, kind of really gravitas serious. Then you go upstairs, you get old watercolors, and they're different projects. They're not completely explained, but that's what I think the catalog's pretty interesting. It's kind of just a taste of things that are going on. So I don't know. I feel it's much better than trying to do a retrospective exhibition with models and everything. It gets so complicated, you don't understand what the point is. The ideas that drive the design for me are the most important thing. And that's what shows up in this. Kristin Feireiss understood that.
Yeah, we will talk about the design process a little bit more, but since you started talking about Chiasma in Helsinki, it's interesting that it was, complete in 98, which was not only special in your career, which was kind of a threshold, first major art project built. But also, this was a special year for the profession because the same year, 1 year before, the Guggenheim opened, and it really brought a lot of optimism to the profession that from now on, anything is possible. So this was one of those key projects, early projects. And I remember there was a lot of excitement about it even in New York because, the 90s, the entire decade was very dry. Nothing was getting built. And all of a sudden, even if it wasn't in New York, still a New York architect gets a possibility to build a major project.
Right. The Architecture League did an exhibition. They wanted to do it. So they did a huge exhibition just about Chiasma. All our models, the different, we built so many different models of all the different parts and pieces. And that was pretty nice. And in the end, the FRAC bought the big model of Chiasma. It's in the permanent collection at the Pompidou Center now. In fact, there was an exhibition called the 90s, and that gigantic model that I did of the Chiasma was in that exhibition.
Maybe you can talk a bit about the concept for this museum, because I understand that when you start designing and this kind of whole process of contemplation, you start from within, right? You start from interior spaces.
Right.
So the life.
So I was reading The Invisible and the Visible by Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and there's a chapter in there called the Chiasma, Chiasma, the intertwining, the idea of, one hand intertwines with the other. And I thought that's an idea for intertwining with the landscape and making this whole building relate to Aalto's Finlandia Hall, which is in the distance. So, we use that as the code. It was an anonymous competition. There was 416 entries, and we won after 1 month of jury. The competitions were so well done in those days. Well, also they're more careful in Europe, but we had CHI as a kind of code word. You had to pick, and anyway, they changed the CH to a K because CH doesn't exist in Finnish, and then now the building became Chiasma, which was the concept from Merleau-Ponty about the intertwining. So the building has an idea that drives the design, but it also gives the building meaning and its name.
And then the sun, very low sun,
right,
made.
So the way the building is shaped, like a catcher's mitt to catch that 41-degree sun, and all the galleries have natural light. 21 galleries, all with different kinds of natural light. So it's all about that northern Scandinavian atmosphere and light and space.
I'm fascinated about your process of drawing watercolors because you said that sometimes or very often it's not related to particular projects. So you even said a drawing shows up and then you have a thought about it.
Exactly, yeah.
Or program what it is that I'm going to draw.
When I actually when we did the symposium over there was a great question and answer period. There were a lot of people at the opening in Berlin on the 6th of February. And, there was one, discussion like that. And I said, yes. I mean, I religiously, and here just right, I could just flip one of these open here. And I'm religiously working, kind of every day on these watercolor pads, no matter what, and let's say half the time it's a building and other times it's drawings. And the interesting thing is when I say drawing is thought, I don't mean necessarily there's an a priori. It can happen intuitively after the drawing has emerged. You have this thought, that's this. And so the process of thinking is galvanized by the process of drawing. And I really think that continues in a lot of architects' work. And it doesn't matter how much horsepower the computer can give us, and it can give us tremendous horsepower. But the idea that drives the design, it's the synapse of the brain. To me, that's important. It has a deeper meaning.
As far as drawings, has anyone influenced you quite directly, would you say?
Oh, I love the the drawings of Giacometti. He was obsessed that drawing is a kind of life. You draw to live, right? Giacometti's drawing and drawing and drawing, right? I love the drawings of Lucan. I own 8 Lucan original drawings here in the archive. When you come up, you have to visit. You have to come up here and spend some time.
I visited a couple of years ago.
You did?
Tour. I
wasn't here.
You were not there. No, this was architectural league, or it was organized. Yeah.
Oh, well.
So,
but I, anytime you want to come, just tell Kelly, and we'll make some, and I'll show you some things. But the models are very important. You see, maybe the drawing is the idea, right? Just a seed germ, and then go right to a model. Make a model. Think of the space. Think of the materiality of the project, and so all the models here trace back chronologically through all the work. 45 years of models.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about the process, because you said architecture should be reinvented for every situation. So how do you begin? Where do you start? Again, you're working kind of backward from space to floor plan, but what are the initial steps, if you could give some?
Initial step is some idea that drives the design. And it's not really clear where that's going to come from, it could come, like in the case of Maggie's cancer care center in London, my only project in London that I'm very proud of, by the way. It's built very well, and it's open to the public. But the idea came from these neumes, this notation. Maggie's is near this oldest cathedral, so old that it predates the musical staff, and the monks used to write these neume notations. And I was studying that, and I was thinking that music is kind of a heartwarming aspect, light, space, architecture. So I wanted the building somehow to be based on some musical idea, and we drew the whole building as a score. All of Arab design, helped us do these steel staff, and then these new notations are in Ocolux, embedded in color in this very highly insulated material. So this is, the idea, the drive, the design was kind of a sketch and a thought. And then there's models built. And then this notion of where's the structure, that became a kind of concrete hand. And then the interior became a kind of basket of bamboo, all bamboo. So there's a thing within a thing within a thing. So there's a concept drawing that shows this thing within a thing within a thing. The outside is this musical notation. So yeah, there's kind of 2 or 3 ideas working together to make that small building. But I'm very proud of that. It's very well built. To me, the details are important. I'm a follower of Carlo Scarpa. I just have this new book of all of his buildings, and I think, when you experience architecture, to see, some intensity of a detail, it speaks to you, right? It's something even a child can understand, So to me, there are a lot of architects that became very commercial, and they don't even look at the aluminum doors that go in and make the entrance to their house or whatever, to their department store or whatever it is. I'm never doing that. I'm staying close, to the source of thinking and the material and the detail. The models that we build, sometimes they're built out of the material that we're thinking of working in. So there's a process that's organic and connecting all aspects of it.
Well, could you give an example? You just said that you're working sometimes with the materials that you are proposing for the building to make.
So for example, that in Amsterdam, we have one building, the Het Austin, which was based on a piece of music by Morton Feldman, and the idea of a Menger sponge. A Menger sponge is the same in elevation as it plan, as it in section. So we built out of brass and copper, and then the final build, we built the model. The models here are all out of brass and copper, and the final building is in verdigris copper.
Wow. Your drawings are often accompanied by texts and words and a lot of oppositions, different forces. If you could maybe give some examples how this process is kind of going hand in hand.
Well, like I said, you can start with a watercolor, and this was. Let me see if I can find an example. Start with a drawing that's this was a project that I was working on for the Kennedy Center before.
You reach.
Yes, but this was just I presented on the 27th of January. This idea of a sail-like shape of a pavilion that was 300 feet long and 100 feet wide, and it was going to be a cover, and it was David Rubenstein and David Rudder, the director, asked me, could we do this pavilion to make so they could have these outdoor events. So I was reading about this building is a living memorial to John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and he loved sailing. So actually, to the end of his life, and I discovered this sketch he made in Dallas because he was in the hotel in Houston, and they went to Dallas the next day. He was assassinated, and on the letterhead on the hotel stationery, he made a sketch of sails, and I said that idea of a sail, of a lightweight translucent fabric that is very simple, the repeating columns, which is like the original Edward Durrell stone building. That would be, the idea for this project, and they loved it. I have, I don't know, these, you can see, and then there was this repeating columns. Anyway, it will never be built because Donald Trump intervened, fired the director, installed himself as the chair. It's a tragedy. It's a political and cultural tragedy.
So you're talking about this project was supposed to be another addition to what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just presented it in Washington, D.C. on the 27th of January. This is fresh. This drawing was made on January 14th, 2025.
Okay, I see.
2025.
Yeah, because he wants architecture to be classical now.
No, he's taking over the whole program. He doesn't want, what does he want? I mean, the guy is it's a tragedy, It's a tragedy. It's really.
It's an incredible project. I was there last year. If you could maybe talk a little bit about how it,
that was a competition.
It's a landscape, right? The building is.
Yeah, it was a competition. We were against Dilla Scofidio, Paycob Fried, Richard Meyer. Well, I saw all their schemes. They were told to just add on to the Edward Durrell stone box. And we said, no, let's go into the landscape and let's connect below grade and make this whole building activate what was a bus parking garage landscape. And the pavilions would just stick up like icebergs and everything would be connected below. So we presented the competition and the jury said, but you can't do that because underneath there is a network of water mains and water waste mains, huge ones, of the city of Washington, D.C. And now they said, we know that. We know how to weave through all of that and connect everything. Just give us another month or a month and a half, and we'll demonstrate, we'll connect with all the engineers and show you how this can work. So they made the competition, they extended it another 2 months and paid us another $50,000. No, they were very good about it. And then we showed them how we could integrate all this underground stuff with the Kennedy Center, and all the spaces get natural light. In the original Edward Darrell Stone building, many rooms don't have any natural light. Many offices don't have any natural light. Every space in our project has natural light. So then we got a unanimous decision to go forward. And at that meeting, David Rubenstein, I'm giving $50 million to this project to go forward. It was incredible. It was an incredible project that way. He's such a supporter of architecture. He was a wonderful, a rare patron of architecture, like the Dominials. Remember the Dominials in Houston? I mean, that's what this was all about. It was something really beautiful. And even Henry Cobb, bless his soul, before he died, I was in a meeting with him and he said, Steven, your Kennedy Center project is the best. No, we won and we got realized, and it's very well built. It's all white concrete and terrazzo ground concrete. But now it's a tragedy what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen.
You said architecture can be inspired by anything. If you could expand on that idea.
Well, this last sketch is inspired by Kennedy's sketch of a sail for sailboats. The architecture of Maggie's is inspired by Neume notations. My architecture, my first house of any importance in Martha's Vineyard was inspired by a whale skeleton that the Indians used to pull up on the beach and put tarps on and skins on and live inside this whale skeleton. So I think it's a great moment in architecture. I said that many years ago, that forget Post-Modernism, forget deconstruction. Deconstruction was just a reactionary movement against Post-Modernism, And I was a student of Aldo Rossi and Giorgio Grossi. But Giorgio Grossi wrote this book called Architecture un lingua morte, a dead language. That means it must come from architecture only. Autonomous architecture. What's really funny is there's a young generation now going back making the same mistakes that were made like 40 years ago. I won't mention any names, but there's someone who's saying architecture is an autonomous discipline. Come on. It's connected to everything in life, connected to the sun, the beauty of the sun, connected to the amazing creations of nature. It's connected to how we move and interact as people. It's not an autonomous discipline. But, and some other young people think that postmodernism is here again, I don't know. It's like a crazy moment in architecture, but I'm inspired. I'm very happy to have, sort of 8-9 things in design going on, and excited. And like I say, anything can inspire architecture. That's a very optimistic and actually, in a way, futuristic.
You believe that architecture is art, whereas a lot of architects, a lot of artists would...
No, I gave a lecture in Rome on the 27th of June, and it was titled Art Drives Architecture. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, an idea drives the design. But that idea has an artistic dimension. It could be music, it could be painting, it could be sculpture, It could be literature. That when art drives architecture, the architecture ends up with a meaning deeper than just so much functional this or answering the commercial needs of blah, 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 and doing it with a kinky curtain wall, and that's it. So, no, I gave this lecture in Rome, and, there were like 360 people, 1,000 people online. I'm very happy with it. And this woman came to me after the talk. She says, I have a project for you. I said, well, come to my hotel room. And, I have a space between 8 and 8:30, and we'll meet. She came. We talked for 2 hours. Barbara Mezzaroma. She's a very powerful woman who inherited one of the largest development companies in Rome. And now we're doing a project in Ostia on the sea. Rome is Ostia, where the Romans went out to sea. And it's really exciting to be doing something in Rome. That's where I began in 1970 as a student.
So what is it? What kind of project? Is it public?
It's in design right now. It's 4 buildings that are 5 stories high, all with views of the sea. So there's a kind of art school, there's condominiums, there's an outdoor cinema, which is like Cinema Paradiso. Barbara knew Federico Fellini.
Wow.
So we're kind of dedicated. And Fellini loved to be at Ostia. I think, the movie 8.5?
Yes, of course.
That beach scene? That's filmed in Ostia. So there's a connection to Fellini, connection to Rome, connection to my sources as an architect, studying in Rome in 1970 with Oster Zarina. It's very important.
So what would you say to those who are not really buying the fact that architecture is art? How would you convince?
They're running everything. They're in charge now. Architecture as a commercial business is in charge. So I wouldn't say anything to them. They're in control. So I just hope that there's a David Rubenstein or two, Deborah Rutter or two, Laura Lee. There was the client for the Maggie's. It's a marginal position. Charles Jenks and I had this discussion. He gave me that award, Built Visions, in 2010, and that's when he assigned me the Maggie's Cancer Center in London. Great man, great thinker. But then we had this discussion about how much of the built world that goes on now is architecture. And I said, maybe it's 3 or 4%. He said, it's much less than that. It's not so much. Zhu Pei makes architecture driven by an artistic idea. I think Young Ho Chang does. I there's hope. There is hope. But a lot of, I don't want to say any names, but they just turned into big commercial operations with 500-700 people.
Yeah.
Negligible.
Speaking of China, you can also mention some of the architects, younger architects who used to work for you, such as
Li Hu used to work for me.
and Gondong.
And they have a pretty good reputation of work that they're doing, and he's still a close friend. We text each other back and forth all the time.
I want to ask you a long question. I will list some of their names some of the descriptions that you use when you talk about architecture. So when you talk about your work, you use such words and phrases as mysterious, poetic, anchoring, intertwining, compression, impulse, idealism, phenomenological, porous and open, luminous, the smell and the light, feeling uplifted, universal and specific, working from inside, spatial energy, disappearing in the folds of space, enmeshed experience, the body in space, inner journey, dynamic and organic relationships, building fallen on itself, driven voids of light, a sequence of overlapping perspective, sequence of movements, shaping of space on an urban scale, building as a landscape, experiential phenomenon, an organic link between concept and form, like a piece of music, and explore the not yet felt. So how else would you describe?
What we need to do, if you want, each one of those will take at least 30 minutes. I think this is about 25. So we will have to do a very long interview where I can articulate each one. You could just, you wrote them down, so you could just give me the list and we'll do a 3 or 4 hour interview. But right now it's 12:49 and I have to leave at 1 o'clock. But I'm glad that you listed those. Those are driving thoughts for me, really driving thoughts. And to me, they're the meaning at the heart of many of my buildings are in those words, but each one has to be articulated. I can't, you put them all together. That's very nice, but that's a much longer discussion.
And what kind of architecture are you trying to achieve?
Well, just take those words and that's it. All the words that you just listed, they indicate something beyond just making a form, an iconic form or something like that, or having commercial success. That's not success. And, success is a spiritual thing.
And
our architecture is also a spiritual thing. And if you have an idea, a meaningful idea that drives a design, people can feel it when they go in the building. You ask people that go into the Chapel of St. Ignatius in Seattle, and they feel there's a spiritual dimension to this place. And that's something you can only get with a lot of work and a lot of effort. And I think they feel it at the Maggie Center in London. So to me, there's a dimension that when you said mysterious, right? What was the first word you used? Mysterious?
That was the first one, poetic, anchoring, intertwining.
Yeah, there's a mysterious dimension to architecture that I cherish. And it's difficult to achieve, but in a few places, I believe we've modestly been able to achieve that. And to me, that's the goal. It's not how big your office is, for God's sake, Lucan had 16 people. I went there. I'd never got a job there, but I was tentatively hired, but he died before I could work there. That's what I wanted to do instead of go to graduate school. There were only 16 people in his office. Now, what's an office of 700 people doing? I don't know. It's a business. That's all. So yeah, I would do a longer interview with you with those words as sort of each one. We can do 15 minutes on each one.
That's a deal.
All right. No, I must say about your work, you're one of the only ones that's trying to dig at ideas. I love that Zupe interview, I think you're a rare bird and you got to keep it up. I hope you don't run out of gas.
No.
It's important work, what you're doing.
I've been doing it for a long time.
Students of architecture today really need what you're doing. And they can't get it just in this on the internet. It's not there. All right.
Okay.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.